You're listening to or watching the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast. I'm James Batchelor. I am joined as ever by Chris Dring. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, technically a day off, but I couldn't. had to come in for the Microcast.
I very much appreciate your dedication. Quick question before we dive in, though. So there was a story I kind of want to get your thoughts on. The Embracer layoffs have now reached Eidos Montreal. 97 people laid off. We can dig deeper into the ongoing Embracer saga. But out of this, it came that a Deus Ex game has been in development for 2 years and has been cancelled. I kind of want to get your thoughts on your thoughts on the Deus Ex franchise as a viable IP, but B, your thoughts on yet another this is the IP potentially on hiatus again.
Yeah, well, you talk. There's so much you can say about Embracer and the sort of corporate vandalism of it and the disaster this has been. But there's something else to say, which is that I don't understand how some of these projects got greenlit. Now, I don't know how long Deus Ex was in development for, but
2 years reportedly.
Yeah. So, but I was that before or after the sale? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Deus Ex isn't the worst vendor of it, but it's not a very successful series. The last one didn't do very well. Immersive sim genre is not, particularly in the AAA end of things, isn't performing particularly well at the minute. So I'm a little bit, I think Deus Ex obviously is a great franchise and there's some amazing games, but I don't know why you go down the route of building a full new Deus Ex over. Eidos Montreal like the game, and it's not that old a franchise. I think the more egregious one for me was TimeSplitters.
Yes.
And for me, TimeSplitters is it's a nobody bought the third game in the series. Famously underperformed. That game came out in 2005. So it's and I love TimeSplitters. It's actually one of my favourite game series, and the thought of it coming back was really exciting to me when I found out they were not just bringing it back; they're rebuilding the Free Radical design team but a part back of my mind going, is this wise? Should we not maybe farm off the game to Night Dive, a remaster for TimeSplitters 2 or something to Night Dive Studios who do these sort of things, or even Dambuster Studios, which Embracer already owned and is in fact the former Crytek UK company, which is of course the former Free Radical Design team. So they sort of had that. I just don't know why they didn't go down that route rather than go into the full. It felt to me like a fanboy sort of commission that project. I really love TimeSplitters. I want to see a TimeSplitters 4. I'm going to rebuild one of my favourite studios and then get them to work on it. And look, I think it's terrible what's happened to that team, and I'm really gutted. And again, genuinely was really looking forward to that game, and obviously loads of people lost their jobs. But I just wonder how does that green lit? Like, you see a lot of games that sort of come out and you sort of know they might have a rough ride. Like Hyenas from Creative Assembly. I think we all felt it was going to have a rough ride before it was cancelled. Sorry. But at least I understood how that was greenlit. Like, it ticked the trend boxes. It sort of was when it was commissioned, the market was heading in that direction. So I got why I get why Suicide Squad, the big conversation this week. I understood why that was greenlit, and because and it might do very well. It's not out yet. I hope it does do well, but I don't understand how you go from TimeSplitters dormant IP. Let's do a full new game with a new AAA studio. And there's no middle ground. There's no middle bit. Maybe I'm being wrong.
No, I'm with you, because that seemed to be Embracer's MO originally when it was just THQ Nordic and it hadn't formed this massive kind of Embracer group, or certainly in the early days of Embracer. The MO seemed to be dusting off all these old IP that it had bought, doing remasters or re-releases or whatever. We had Destroy All Humans, we had the DeBlob games were dusted off and re-released to kind of gauge whether or not there's demand for them, which then led to a new Darksiders, for example. So you would have thought, in TimeSplitters' case, let's remaster the original trilogy and see if people want it. Activision did that with Crash Bandicoot, and that led to Crash Bandicoot 4. With Deus Ex, I wonder, reportedly been in development for 2 years. It's been about 18 months since Embracer bought Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal and all kind of Square Enix. So I don't know where the timeline, whether that was already in development before they bought it or whether it was an Embracer decision. If it was an Embracer decision, I wonder if it was kind of we've bought these studios, we've bought all this big IP, we need to do something with these IP. I mean, there's already it was a month, and they announced there was a new Tomb Raider in development. Deus Ex, I think, was an interesting one because it's a really storied franchise, but as you say, it hasn't ever performed particularly well. I mean, the original one is kind of held up there. It's very well renowned. I can never remember how well it sold. Invisible War...
Human Revolution did well.
Human Revolution did well. Mankind Divided did not. Invisible War did not. So it's been up and down in terms of commercial performance. But equally, I can see Embracer looking at Deus Ex, of the IP they bought, looking at Deus Ex and thinking, right, this is the one that has kind of the prestige that we want to kind of, get a bit more notice, get a bit more attention, potential demand. Obviously, regardless of whether this was started pre or post Embracer, if it's been in development for 2 years, that's post Cyberpunk. So I wonder if someone has said, well, look, Cyberpunk turned out okay. Maybe the original Cyberpunk game get dusted off.
And I'm being unfair, you're moving into speculation sort of now, but there's an element of I got the same thing when Microsoft commissioned a Perfect Dark game, right? And part of me goes, would they not be better off doing a new shooter? Because the only people who the Perfect Dark brand resonates with is people who are nearly 40, who played the game back in 2000. So, but sometimes if you've got an IP that can give you a bit more attention, if Skylanders started off with Spyro and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm being a bit harsh, and maybe and I'd also argue that TimeSplitters was quite a unique shooter in its way that sort of has faded away in recent years. That sort of arcadey multiplayer co-op local multiplayer sort of experience, and I think maybe there was a room for those sort of games, and I can understand how it went from that. I guess it points that period of excess though, right? From a pure business numbers perspective, you'd look at something like Deus Ex, you look at something like TimeSplitters and go, this is not the odds are against this working. But when there's so much money floating around and everything's the numbers are going up as fast as they were, you sort of go, let's go with it. And I think that's that's part of what we're seeing. It's not just that period of excess wasn't just hiring loads of people and opening loads of studios and buying loads of things. It was commissioning projects that actually probably wouldn't have got commissioned if things were a bit tighter, which they are now.
Yeah, I think my last thought on this is my growing concern with Embracer, and indeed any of the companies going through really tough times at the moment, is the sheer amount of IP they own that has this kind of history. I'm absolutely all for the industry needs new IP. It needs new IP. We can't just rely on the same franchises over again. It's kind of a shame that we don't see more new IP at AAA, and when we do, it doesn't necessarily do particularly well. But equally, there are I think, historically relevant IPs that I do want to see continue. TimeSplitters, Deus Ex, fanboy moment, but Thief, obviously I'd love to see Thief continue, and that got bought up in the same transaction. My worry is that Deus Ex was already on hiatus after Mankind Divided struggled, despite the fact that when Mankind Divided was announced, they announced they were going to do a whole universe of projects and there was going to be a whole cross-media thing. Deus Ex was already on hiatus. They've apparently tried to get it going again, and now it's gone. Will it come back again? Same with TimeSplitters. I think it's a shame to lose part of the industry's history. I
don't think these things are lost. I think
I guess
it's these things. It happens in every other medium. Bands don't exist anymore that were around 20, 30 years ago. The music does. The music still does. We still listen to it. We still play it. And I think it's just a matter of making sure we bring that stuff with it. In actual fact, in this current market where people are trying to be more sustainable and actually make profit and deliver money, I actually expect a lot of these games that people that came out 20 years ago will get dusted off, and whether that's launched into subscription services, Nintendo Switch Online or whatever, or brought back out. We've got studios like Night Dive that are knocking out in pretty good remasters of sort of shooters, not in pretty good, very good, and in quite quickly with quite small teams. These are ways for the industry not to make. It's not going to change the world, but you quite hit the nail on the head, right? If you look at the biggest selling games, even the biggest engagement-based games, the games that are top of the mobile store, they're all the same games, and they have been for 5 years. Every now and again, you get an Elden Ring or whatever break in. And of course, we had Hogwarts Legacy last year, but even that was Harry Potter. And don't be wrong, it's not like we're doing much better than Hollywood, but even TV constantly reinvents itself. They constantly go, right, Game of Thrones is done. Okay, they move on to House of Dragon, but you sort of they move on to some other stuff, and Stranger Things, and then we see these big Lost, and all throughout the history of these big TV shows, that X-Files, they come along, they do a thing, they move on to the next one. And in games, we seem to be stuck in a sort of the same titles dominating stuff. And I don't think that's good for the industry's overall future growth.
No.
But anyway, that's almost a different subject.
It is.
It is a different subject.
It is. And I'm going to move us on to a different subject, because there's a couple of really big stories this week that I did want to talk about. We ended up talking about that slightly longer than I planned to, but it was interesting. So, right. My voice went higher there than it should have done. Let's crack on with some much bigger news. So, first, I kind of want to talk about Apple. Apple has made changes to iOS and the way iOS is going to work in order to comply with the Digital Markets Act in Europe. So the European Union's Digital Markets Act, I think, comes into full effect this year, and as such, Apple has to make changes. These changes only apply to Europe. They don't necessarily apply to US or any other market. The two big ones were it's going to allow alternative app stores is going to be allowed on iOS now. So, Epic gets its wish. It can launch the Epic Game Store, and I think it has already essentially announced it's going to launch an Epic Game Store on iOS and bring Fortnite back to iOS later this year. However, Apple has changed the terms of their business terms and switching to new terms where you can use alternative distribution and payment processing or different app stores means that Apple is still entitled, according to its terms, to a 17% take of all transactions. This goes up to 20% if you still want to use the App Store's payment processing. They did a similar thing with the US, like this is separate from the Digital Markets Act, but following the Epic versus Apple, the rejection of the Epic versus Apple appeals by the Supreme Court, they've said that yes, you can now use alternative or payments on iOS, so you can direct people to your own website and they can buy virtual currency directly from you. But any transactions made after going through that link give you entitle Apple to a 27% commission, which is only 3% shorter than the 30% that Apple was trying to avoid. They have also cleared the way for streaming apps. So previously they've been blocking things like Xbox Game Pass's cloud streaming and Google Stadia. May it rest in peace. They were blocking these apps. They weren't allowing streaming apps for video games because they argued, there were many arguments, and it always usually comes down to like security and privacy. Their argument was we can't review every game individually on these services, so we can't allow them. Never mind that doesn't seem to work for movie or TV streaming or music streaming, etc. But for games, it was a problem. They've now opened it up that you can introduce a streaming service to iOS. You can bring a Stadia-like or a Game Pass cloud gaming app to Apple. There's a few kind of caveats, nowhere near as bad as the 27% or 17% commissions, but it's things like you need to go through, there's certain review processes you have to go through to ensure that all the games on your thing are compliant, but by and large, this opens it up. On the surface, Apple has complied with the laws, as it should, and has opened up its platform. But there's so many kind of caveats here and fees there, like the backlash, like Tim Sweeney, Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney. I loved his he described the new policy as a devious new instance of malicious compliance. And then even like Sarah Bond, Xbox boss, Xbox exec, she's come out like I think today or yesterday, and she said like this is absolutely a step in the wrong direction that Apple has taken.
She was a little bit more political in her language. But
she was, yes.
She was. And Sarah Bond is very, very good with that sort of thing. It is. I mean, here's the thing. I think this is that we live in. I understand people can try and compare its situation to consoles and how Apple closing down its platform, protecting its platform, and I actually understand that position that Apple's taken. But we live in a duopoly in mobile, right? There are two mobile operators. Competition is really. I think competition is really needed in mobile. In order to drive the market for games and for most things. I think Apple is just doing everything it can to frustrate the process at the minute. I think it's inevitable. I just think it's going to happen. It's going. They will, and it's just, and this will have to go back, and the EU will go. No, this isn't what we meant, and it's like, and it's but obviously they're trying to frustrate the process. The whole thing's taking far longer than I think the industry was hoping it would. Developers, broadly speaking, Apple's obviously a great platform, but they've never overly been loved by the games industry, mainly because they've always felt that Apple doesn't really care too much about software and games. They've always used it as a means to sell their hardware rather than the other way around. So, but it does feel like we're going to be difficult with this, and we're going to be as difficult as we possibly can, because obviously it potentially loses the money. But I think in the long term, you live in a world where there's two mobile operators. Mobile manufacturers. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move to a position where people can compete on that platform, just like you can compete with PCs, and you can, different Internet Explorers can be on all that kind of stuff. You just need to be able to make that possible, and I'm sure there's a way to sort of overcome those security concerns. It's just. And I think it's important. I think it's important for Xbox to have a store on there. I think it's important for Epic to have a store on there. And I think it's important for those things to actually be able to compete with Apple's own. But I also, and I just feel that this whole thing is just dragging on. But I do actually think it's one of the opportunities for the games industry. We talk about the games industry going for a hard time, but I think, the opening up of the app stores will be a major boost to the industry. Not necessarily immediately, but over time.
If it's opened up enough and it's done right, absolutely. Like I think that can only be a good thing. I think, like you say, like Apple are doing their very very best to kind of frustrate the process, as you say. Like is all these kind of extra commissions and like the faff of going onto of handling different app stores, different distribution to different app stores, different platforms and so forth already is quite difficult. You add in extra fees, it's really easy to imagine a lot of developers thinking, actually we'll just stick with just Apple's process, which at the risk of using an analogy from kind of the indie publishing route, kind of indie book publishing. There's a big kind of debate going wide, so publishing your book on lots of different platforms versus going exclusive, which is Amazon. Amazon dominates the fiction and certainly the ebook space, and you can only be on like Kindle Unlimited if you're only exclusive to Amazon. And on the one hand, broadening yourself and putting your work out there on a multitude of different platforms means that more audiences can get them, because some consumers have strong feelings about certain platform holders. There are people who refuse to buy from Amazon, but then equally managing, and I'm thinking particularly for indie developers and smaller studios, the nature of managing, releasing a game on loads of different stores and tracking your sales across different stores and marketing and making sure everything's working, customer service, etc. It can be a nightmare. So focusing on one store and one dominant store does seem the easier option, and it
might be easier, but if discoverability is tough as well, you're talking. The more. This is the thing I always used to. People talk back in the day when I talk about people talk about how there's so many games, too many games out last year, and there were people, particularly, there were tons of games out in 2008, and I went, but there were like 100. There was like 100 different game retailers, where you can't get shelf space in that store. Maybe you can get shelf space in this store, and there's loads of them you could go to. If you couldn't get shelf space on Steam, well, goodbye. Right, I just think we need to see stronger competition in that field. I
agree.
But
absolutely,
I understand. If they frustrate the process, people just won't do it. But I just think eventually the regulators are going to break this down. It's just it's just that Apple will resist and push back against it as long as they can.
It's going to be interesting to see, because obviously this is only specific to Europe for now. This is not like a worldwide change to iOS. So actually, give it a few years, and depending on when other app stores establish themselves, we might be able to have like kind of direct comparison of the US market is still kind of iOS only, App Store only, and there's no third-party stores. How well are games faring there compared to Europe, where you've got Epic and Xbox and so forth?
There's resistance happening in all the countries. You might see it staggered.
It's staggered. It's like those staggered periods might just give us some interesting comparisons. So, other big story this week I wanted to discuss was Microsoft. Microsoft is the latest to announce widespread mass layoffs, 1,900 staff across various divisions of its business, nearly 9% of its gaming employees, actually, so, across its kind of gaming and Xbox business. Among that, we've seen Mike Ybarra has left as Blizzard Entertainment's president. He's been replaced by, is he Johanna? Johanna Ferries. I apologise to Johanna or Johanna if I've got that wrong. But point is, we've got Johanna is now president of Blizzard Entertainment, which is brilliant, kind of new leadership. She previously was general manager of Call of Duty, so kind of really kind of interesting experience there. The fallout from Microsoft, the Microsoft layoffs has been interesting. Obviously, we're still getting dribs and drabs of information as to which studios have been affected. It's believed that the majority of them have been the duplicate positions across Activision Blizzard. So obviously, Activision Blizzard acquisition got completed just in October. That kind of, I think, Chris, you and I were talking about this years ago of how Microsoft already has a publishing team, for example, and then Bethesda has a publishing team which it bought, and then Activision Blizzard has 2 publishing teams. That's 4 publishing teams in one company. There's a lot of kind of overlap and crossover there, and this is, as horrible as this sounds, this feels like a necessary streamlining. I don't want to see 1,900 people losing their job to streamline a business, but
it wasn't necessary. They didn't need to buy the company.
That's true.
I'm sort of. I've been hammered online by Xbox fans, which I tend to ignore them, but because I've been a little bit skeptical of this consolidation. And the reason why I'm skeptical, there's a few reasons. One, because I was always a bit like, I don't like this deal. Was because when you, as you quite rightly pointed out, there's Activision Blizzard's huge, and Microsoft have bought things that they really need. Right, they've bought mobile development and IP. They've bought PC development and IP. Really strong PC studio in Blizzard. And they've bought Call of Duty, which could boost Game Pass and offers loads of opportunities for them on a global level. But they've also bought a load of stuff they don't need, right? And I know sometimes acquisitions, that's just the accounts department. I'm sorry for any accountants out there. It's just the accounts department. Sometimes it's you mentioned publishing divisions. Obviously, you need a bigger publisher and you've got more games, but you don't necessarily need 3 heads of PR and 3 people talking to IGN about the same game. Or if you're Warner Brothers, you have to talk to IGN at all. But the sort of I always thought they're going to close stuff. But here's the thing: Microsoft likes limited integration, so I was optimistic that they wouldn't happen for a while. And limited integration means they just sort of leave them alone. But the thing is, as soon as the numbers start going down, or they fear the numbers are going to go down, you will expect that the axe will fall, and you can easily see where they can cut. You can easily see they can reduce that publishing team, or was it the game they cancelled from Blizzard? Is it Odyssey or whatever it's code named or something like that? I can't remember what it's called exactly, but the I'm sure Blizzard and Activision are working on games that actually are quite similar to games that Microsoft might be working on. All right, that's maybe they're not, but there'll be things they were like, there's things we can cut here. But as I say, if the numbers are going up, they probably would have left it alone. But the numbers aren't going up, and things are tough, and that's when the axe is falling. And it was always like this was always going to happen at some point, whether it was within 3 months of the deal going through or a year or whatever, and it's frustrating. Obviously, I appreciate that Microsoft felt they needed it in order to compete more strongly, and maybe that's true. But I don't like consolidation on this level for these sort of reasons. And it's such a shame. But yeah, and it's Microsoft's. They're sort of. They're not hiding behind how tough it is out there in the market, and also tough out there. I think it's worth pointing out that it's the sustainability of this industry. It just isn't sustainable. We spent too much money, and we increased everyone's salaries, and then the inflation went up, so we have to increase everything again, and costs have gone up, and we're not revenue actually in real terms is down. Actually, when you think about how much costs have got, how much inflation's gone up, the amount of revenue increases we're seeing is not matching that. We're in a position where you kind of have to. I think we need to be a more sustainable industry. It's just that we went through this period of such excess that this period of pain is so extreme. And I believe, in fact, I'm confident that by the end of it, we'll have a far more sustainable business where everyone can feel a bit more secure in their jobs and they can see the profitability of their companies. And that, once we're through this nightmare, the industry will be looking up again, and hopefully in a far more mature and wiser fashion. That's cold comfort at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, massively. I kind of want to dig a little deeper into a couple of bits around this one, which is, you mentioned the numbers are going up and the numbers are not going up, etc. There's been a little bit of kind of 2 + 2 = 5 maths going on recently. One is that a lot of people kind of presented, I understand the optics of it, etc., but a lot of people kind of presented this as Microsoft lays off 1,900 people when the company's market cap passed 3 trillion. It is one of, if not the most valuable companies, most wealthy companies in the world. Absolutely, that's a terrible look. But equally, they'll have looked at this on, like the gaming. If you look specifically at Microsoft's gaming division, because that 3 trillion cap, that's come from the rise in AI and all the kind of non-gaming stuff that Microsoft does. So I think there's a slight leap of logic there, personally.
Yeah, I sort of, when I see those sort of comments, which is about like, the company's making loads of money, why do they keep these? Why are they making these cuts? I'm a bit like, well, because they're businesses. They're not your friends. And I know.
Oh, yeah.
Brendan wrote this opinion piece, and your boss might be your friend, and the people around you might be friends, but the business isn't your friend. The business is a business, and if you're not needed, right, it doesn't matter how much the company's making. They're not going to keep you on, because it's. And I know that games, we're passionate people. We love our jobs and we love what we do, and I love my job and I love what I do. But I don't love Reed Pop. I don't hate Reed Pop either. Reed Pop is a corporate conglomerate that will lay me off the moment they don't need me, and I will always remember that. And it's actually quite freeing to remember that. So I sort of see that, and I'm like, but they're not going to just keep a load of staff on they don't need just for the sake of. They might, the boss might forget that they've got staff they don't need if all the numbers are going up. But as soon as their department's not hitting their targets, then things need to sort of move.
Yeah.
And so I understand it looks terrible, and it's
the optics, isn't it? Yeah. But like the last thing I wanted to discuss was there's reports, rumours, etc. I don't believe any of this has been confirmed, that a large part of what was affected by the 1900 cuts was Microsoft's publishing division that actually handles getting games into physical retail and physical distribution of games. And this has been combined with rumours of another digital-only Xbox coming out, etc. I kind of want to get your thoughts, obviously, on it.
So I was told by a major publisher about just before Christmas that across Europe, several retailers have started just not listing Xbox anymore. Right. So they've just stopped stocking Xbox games because the Xbox is such a digital console now that physical performance of Xbox games is really low, and ultimately when you're selling a console that most people are just downloading games for, it doesn't really benefit the retailer very much because the margin on hardware is often quite small. So I wasn't able to collaborate that. I couldn't find which retailers these are, but it was a proper senior European publishing boss that said it to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of this is Xbox is pushing away from physical, but actually I don't think physical retailers are going to care. It's they might sell the controllers and things like that, but ultimately Xbox is so digital. When you think of PC and mobile being digital dominated, Xbox isn't that far behind anymore. PlayStation's a little further behind, and Nintendo's a little bit further behind that. But it's such a digital dominant console. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some of these moves are just necessary. You don't need as many people focusing on box shifting when ultimately fewer retailers are stocking your products.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm going to wrap us up there because I think we are once again bordering on...
These microcasts are becoming increasingly less micro with every passing week.
For which we apologise. Thank you so much for joining me again, Chris. It's always a pleasure to start off our week like this, even though it's Tuesday. And really appreciate you coming to this on your day off. Go away and do some non-work now.
I'm cleaning the house.
That sounds delightful. Screw it then. Let's go for another hour. What do you reckon? Thank you all for listening or watching. You can find the previous Microcasts on the podcasting platform of your choice, along with the actual full-blown GamesIndustry.biz podcast. We are revamping our full-length show. More on that in the weeks to come. Don't expect that anytime soon, but we are going to be back next Monday. Monday, not Tuesday. We're going to be back next Monday with the next Microcast, and you can, as always, get more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz.